Hello. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate the subtle yet important difference between setting up performance metric alerts for native Azure VMs versus Arc-enabled servers. I've seen a few customers get a bit confused when it comes to creating alerts for metrics for Arc-enabled servers, especially if they have done this before for their native Azure VMs. And I'm going to point out to the differences is how and where you can go to extract the needed conditions. That is how you configure the alert and what the alert parameters have to be inclusive of Arc-enabled servers as well as those native Azure VMs. So let's begin. I'm going to start with just with a native Azure virtual machine. So in my little subscription here, I'll pick on one of my native Azure VMs. You can notice this is not an Arc-enabled VM. This is a native Azure VM, just DC1. It's a virtual machine sitting deployed to one of my regions. And if I go down to DC1's blades here and I go to the monitoring section, and just like if you're used to Azure VMs as well as Arc-enabled, there's this nice insights under monitoring, which gives you some heads up on performance metrics, CPU, memory, network, health, etc., utilization, available memory, etc. What's also nifty about native Azure virtual machines is, well, from here, I can actually pretty easily just say, hey, I want to take all of the recommended alerts, and which, by the way, is documented here, and I'll share this link in the blog. I want to take the enabled recommended alert rules for Azure virtual machines, which are talked about here, which talks about how you can create them, and I just want to make them so. So in the portal, we make it pretty easy for you. So they even click this little star tab up here for a native Azure VM, and it says, "Yep, great, already created. I've already done this." But essentially, here are the 6 or 8 different performance metrics with default values that creates these alerts that would pop in and give you alert warnings, which you can hook up to email notifications as well as actions within action groups, that type of thing. So if we go back so this is already established. So let's take a look what that looks like. So when you click that button, or if you go to monitor and you just create those yourself. So if I go to this alert rule, because I clicked that button, there should be a bunch here with DC1 because that's the name of the machine. And so let's pick on the one that got created by this recommended alert button. So if I go in here and I look and look at this rule, it says, okay, well, great, there's source. That makes sense. It's DC1. That makes sense. That's my resource, the scope of what I'm trying to alert from. And from there, I need to pick a signal. And notice that there's all these signals, right? Here's the most popular ones. You can see that the one that we're on is percentage CPU. But if I click on all these, there's all these wonderful metrics in this case that I can pick from. A note, and this will be important later, it says signal sources, platform metrics from that resource. Okay, so great. Not much I can do here, and I can create one like this from here, and go about creating performance metrics for one or more of my native Azure VMs. Okay, so that's great. How about some of my Arc machines? So let's look at Azure Arc. So if I go, here's a handful of Azure Arc machines I have. So let's pick on one of them. Let's go to just one of my Windows boxes is an Arc enabled server. And just like my native Azure VM, let me scroll down to monitoring, and great, we have this insights choice. But where's my alerts? And where's that little star that says, hey, I want to just light up all those recommended alerts, just like my native Azure VMs? I mean, a VM is a VM, right? And the answer is yes and no. So let's go ahead and say, okay, well, great. I can't do anything here, but let's go back to Azure Monitor and let's go to alerts and say, well, okay, well, let's just create an alert manually. And so again, my target is going to be one of those Arc systems. So I think it was 22 here. And so I'm going to apply. So there's my scope, right? Great. So now I got to do is go to my connections and pick a signal. Uh-oh. Well, where are all my wonderful platform metrics? Here's the difference. Notice the signal source, at least this time, if I'm pointing at the Arc-enabled system, there are no platform metrics because the Arc-enabled server is not on the Azure platform. The native Azure VM is. So the platform metrics exist. It's kind of a default thing for any Windows and Linux virtual machine, or really a lot of resources have these platform metrics that are just there and available. And therefore I can just create alerts off of them. I don't necessarily even need a log analytics workspace to make that happen. Well, we're talking Arc-enabled server. This is a server that's most likely on premises, running on ESX or some hypervisor, or it's bare metal, or it's running in somebody else's cloud. The point is, it's not in Azure. So if we want to collect this, I have to enable Azure Monitor, and I have to then, with data collection rules, tell that server to, hey, send me your logs, send me the performance metrics I care about to a log analytics workspace up into Azure. And so I've done that just to prove that out. I've set up Azure Monitor. As you can see, I had insights. So, well, they're the metrics. I'm in Azure. It's Arc-enabled. I can see that. Well, how is that happening? Well, the reason that's happening is because I am basically ingesting the CPU metrics. So here's a rule that I have. And if I look at the configuration of this rule, you'll notice that it includes pretty much all of the various metrics from the system that it is going to associate with. And I'm going to, every 60 seconds, according to this rule, take it to this log analytics workspace, LA2. So remember, ArcBox LA2 is my log analytics workspace. And notice that this rule applies to various resources, and yep, Win2K22 is one of them. Well, that's great and all, but how do I create an alert for Win2K22 just like I can for native Azure? Here's the difference. So if I go back to alerts and I want to go create a rule, and again, I'm doing this through Portal, and I'll show you some nifty ways you can do it, obviously through CLI and templates and ARM templates and Bicep, and et cetera. But remember when I did this the first time, I did it based on the name of the resource, the scope being the target of the server. Well, the target's not really the server in this case. The target should be where that data is ending up, and that's the log analytics workspace. Remember, ArcBox LA2. This is the log analytics workspace type. So if I pick this as my target scope, and then I hit next to go to conditions, and then when I look at signals, hooray, I've got all of these wonderful metrics. And why do I have this? Well, because that particular log analytics has a collection rule that's one or more systems is sending these various metrics because I told it to. And so now these are choices for my alerts, my conditions of my alert. So let's look for kind of the one everybody thinks of first. Let's percent processor time. If I hit apply, a couple of nifty things happen here. One is it gives me some, we had set the condition configuration automatically based on popular settings for the metric. Now you can change these, right? You don't have to take the defaults, but these are nifty because they kind of map the recommended alert rules for native Azure VMs. The second thing that's real nifty about this is that, okay, well, how, that log analytics workspace might have one machine in it, could have a bazillion machines in it. Maybe I want this thing to apply to all computers that land in there. How do I do that? Well, I can do that because here's a enumeration of just the total of all computers that are sending this particular metric to there. And by clicking this box, include all future values, it will include everything that's in there as well as any machines that might be in there tomorrow or the next day, and start sending those metrics to it. So that's pretty nifty too. And notice that you can do some other filters, right? You can do other dimensions and or other conditions. So you can get very dynamic if you have a particular nomenclature, like a starts with type thing, to where, maybe you don't want everything to trigger off this particular for everything in the workspace. In this case, I'm going to keep it simple. The other thing is that notice this DC1, well, that's not an ARC thing. A computer is a computer is a computer. So as far as log analytics workspace is concerned, and this particular performance metric, it's a Windows machine with that. So that's nice because it's consistent. And if I want, I can just simply, tackle all of this with one alert pointing to the same log analytics workspace and include everything, both current and future. So if I do that and I go to the actions, and this is where it's up to you how you want to do this. You don't have to have actions at all. The most typical actions are, hey, email somebody, send me an email with all the details of what's going on here. If you do create like an actual action group, you can do notifications, obviously email somebody. But what's more interesting is Actions can actually do webhook stuff, logic app triggering, those types of things to actually even maybe inform other systems at play, some other management systems you might have as an action for that for that particular alert. And this whole walkthrough, that's a whole other topic of how to do that. And there's, how do you do auto resolution and suppression and all that stuff. But essentially, that's just part of how the alerts work. So for now, I'm just going to say none, just so I can go through here and just give this guy a name. We'll call it alert 3 and go through. I don't really have any tags, and then go ahead and create. And so what happens now is this will create an alert. It will alert off of, I think it was an average 75% over, if it sustains over like either 5 or 15 minutes. I can't remember what the default is. I would, basically just see this in this dashboard. If I had action groups attached to it, I'd have email blasts come out, etc. For both, in my case, both my Arc-enabled systems that land in that log analytics workspace, as well as even native Azure VMs, if I wanted to set it up that way, and I do in this particular case. So that's the important distinction, and it does drive people a little crazy, and especially when you sit here and you go, and it just makes logical sense that you want to target the scope of being the actual thing, the Arc-enabled resource, and in this case, for performance measures, you just can't do that. You got to think the target has to be the log, where that stuff is coming from, wherever it's coming from, into that log analytics workspace. Finally, the last thing I'll point out is there absolutely are other ways you can create, just like anything in Azure, ARM templates, bicep policy. A colleague of mine maintains this site, and this is pretty nifty. It's Azure Monitor Baseline Alerts. It's a GitHub repo that's maintained, and it's pretty massive. It has a lot of good content out there about how to set Azure policy, landing zones, etc., for not just VMs, native VMs, and such, but also all types of resources in Azure that we have recommended. Hey, you really should set up alerts for these things. And so just to give you a sense of that, if I go to the Azure Alerts, notice it's everything, right? Everything you can imagine. It basically has some default templates that you can use, or policy definitions you can use in your configuration and your setup of your Azure environments. And since we're on the topic, notice there's even this hybrid compute one. So if I look at machines, notice these should look familiar. We can create via a template, via command line, via the portal, just fill in the blank type of issue, kind of sort of what I did. And what this will do, because these are hybrid machines, it will create an insight metrics query, very similar to how I created that log query by just picking through, picking the log analytics scope and the condition. So for example, if I go to this one for processor utilization percentage log alert, it'll give you the, what's going on here and there. It'll give you the raw ARM template that I can cut and paste and maybe customize for my own purposes. Same with Bicep, or I can just even use this nifty deployed Azure. So it'll take the ARM template JSON and open up a custom template portal interface for you, and essentially do the same thing. I'm going to create an alert. I'm going to call it this. Here's that magic. There's where the magic happens. That's the query that happens to the log analytics workspace. And then here's where you would feed it the resource ID or IDs of the machines you want to have this particular alert fired for. And so that's it. Hopefully that clears up if any confusion, especially if you're first getting started with Arc enabling servers for the intent of Azure Monitor and trying to figure out, well, where do they put just the basic performance metrics? How can I create alerts? This is hopefully a good tutorial or walkthrough to kind of to show you that. Thanks for listening.